said if you're on the wrong path, and I wanted to just challenge you there and then say there is no right or wrong. It's just a path, but it's if you want to change paths, if you decide you're on a path that doesn't serve you anymore, and not to be so limited by the idea of, oh my God, I've spent this long, so I must just carry on down that way. And you gave a beautiful example of, well, you've got a platform you can always go back to, but if you really want to grow, then just try it and see where it takes you. What's the worst that could happen? You'll gain experiences, you'll learn lessons that you can use moving forward in whichever path you then choose to go down.
What if burnout isn't caused by doing too much, but by operating out of alignment with who you really are? In this episode of Give Yourself Some Leeway, I'm joined by Dr. Rana Al-Falaki, a leadership and performance coach and founder of Nail It Leadership. Dr. Rana shares how mindset, identity, and energy management shape sustainable success. We explore why high performance often leads to burnout, how the Nail It system helps you align your needs and environment with your goals, and how questioning the stories you tell yourself can unlock real freedom. If you're a professional, entrepreneur, or leader who wants to succeed without constant exhaustion, this episode is for you. Dr. No, welcome to Give Yourself Some Leeway. I'm going to get straight into this. And we just said this before I pressed record, and it was, I love asking this question for the people who know how to answer it. And that is, who are you?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on here. I am a ball of energy, enlightenment, abundance, joy, purpose, and mission. Do you want me to expand?
Yes, because that can be, for some people, that is a mouthful.
Yeah. So many adjectives, right? And I think this question is so relevant because when we ask who you are, and I'll often go around, I used to absolutely hate networking. For an introvert, I'm very good at public speaking, but put me in a room with other people and I wouldn't say I freeze, but I just get very shy. And now actually I use that opener because it's just such a fantastic one. Who are you? Who are you really at your core? Which is often how I'll start a speech. And so I invite people, as you and I have just been talking, not to put a label on it, not to think about who you are in terms of the role that you play in life, the job that you do, whether you're a parent, a father, a daughter, an uncle, a niece, whether you're in my case, a clinician or a hospital consultant or an executive, but who are you really? So in other words, how do you resonate? So when I just gave you a whole bundle of adjectives, it's about who I am inside in terms of what I'm actually about. So I'm joy because it's not that I'm a joyful person, but I resonate in that energy of joy. I resonate in mission. I am someone who's full of purpose, which doesn't mean I have a purpose. Of course I do. And I have a mission. Of course I do. But I live that mission. I live purposefully. I live a life full of purpose. Those are just a couple of the adjectives, the same way that I talked about abundance and I talked about energy. When people meet me, they think, oh, wow, you're full of energy. You're this really energetic person. You walk in the room and people feel you. And we're not talking woo-woo here. We're just talking pure physics because all of us have an energetic field around us. Let's put us in a scanner and we'll see that. So that's who I am. Who are you, by the way?
Who am I? I love this question too, because people expect a job title. They expect a job title, they expect where you're from, what your beliefs are, which side politics you're in. And I'm like, no, none of these are what's your favorite football team? Sports goes over my head. So it's very easy for me. I just go, I'm a curious mind who loves sharing stories. And that leaves an open thread for anything. And that makes conversation easier for the people who want to have a conversation. And for the people who think, oh, that's too much. That's a conversation that I get to avoid the superficial surface level with them. Because they're like, oh, well, I want to talk about your favorite sports team. I'm like, 9% of men would love to speak about their favorite sports team. I'm sure you can find them. That's not me. That's not me. I can talk about anything else. If it's sports and if it's cars, I'm sure you can find someone else who would love to divulge in that conversation, but I'm not going to pretend that I enjoy those things.
But you are a curious mind.
I'm a very curious mind. And that was one of the reasons why I started having guests on the podcast was because people said, we don't resonate with your story. We know what you're like, Eugene. We probably won't resonate with whatever you have to say. I'm like, okay, but I guess I'm not the only person to ever feel this way. Maybe there are other people who've ever struggled with burnout, stress, overwhelm, difficulty in the workplace, and found a way to overcome that. And I'm going to create a safe space for people to share their story. And they can share that story with me and choose whether or not they want to publish that. And that's where my curious mind led me, was to be open to other people's stories and see where life is taking them.
Yeah, yeah. And there's always a commonality, isn't there? When we talk about storytelling, you have to think, what's the benefit of the story? Because I could sit there and I could start, oh, I was born back in the 1970s to, and I was born in London, and I could go on and on and on. Well, is that my story? And also, what is the story you choose to own? Because in reality, we have many stories. So am I going to go back to the 70s and give you 50 years worth of stories? No. But what are the key elements within my life that were my learning points or my turning points that I could then use to help and empower someone else? And from that, when people hear stories, they take from it what they want, don't they? So it doesn't sound like we're preaching. It isn't a case of, I did this and I went down that path, so I'm really telling you, you shouldn't do that, because people don't learn that way, because they can't identify with themselves. They're all the only way they'll identify is they'll say, well, that was you're not the same as me, go figure. And so that's you, that's what you are about. It's not necessarily what I'm going to go through. And I think people have to learn through experiences, and they learn through their own experiences. So yes, we can give them the wisdom, but for them to really resonate with you is I'm going to tell you a story, and because you're going to wear whatever filter you're going to wear to interpret it however you want. Even when you read bedtime stories when you're a child, two different people, they hear two different things. It depends what lens they're wearing, even though that one person may be saying the same thing, right?
Yes, yes. And that's one thing I love about all the stories shared. People are going to resonate with some things and not with others, or they're going to have their own angle, or as you said, their own filter. But for me, it doesn't matter whether they take my angle or take their own, as long as it gets them the help that they need or helps them get through whatever they're going through. That's a win for me. So they can say, I want to be just like Eugene, or I want to be anything but Eugene. Makes no difference to me. As long as it serves them in a way that helps them with whatever they're going through. And sometimes people choose to ignore it, as long as they make the personal choice themselves. As long as they're not saying, oh, well, I'm just following advice mindlessly. This is what everyone else is doing, so if everyone else is jumping off a cliff, I'm going to jump off a cliff. My mother loves using that analogy. It was like, oh, do you believe everything that Mark or Susan says? It's like, if they jumped off a cliff, would you follow them? But that was always the analogy when we were kids. But yeah, that was the thing, is as long as I'm making the decision for myself and taking ownership of that decision, then I have no regrets, or I'm taking full accountability of the result or the outcome.
Yeah, so you're making a choice, which is one of the things I always talk about. And it can be a little bit controversial, can't it? And I know you believe the same thing, in that every single thing is choice. Everything you choose to think, feel, act is a choice. And yet a lot of people don't feel that, which is why they don't feel free, because you'll hear the words, I don't have any choice, I'm trapped, I'm stuck, it isn't my choice. But actually every tiny little thing is choice, isn't it?
Exactly. Rana, what's your choice coming onto the podcast? What is it that you want to share?
Well, my choice is also something, is that we have similar stories, in terms of there is a layer of pushing yourself and working yourself into the ground so hard that you come crashing down in the end, be that burnout, be that chronic illness. And I know that my story, similarly to you, in the way that your story can do the same, is a lesson, and so many learnings to be able to empower people, make them curious, and think a different way. That's why I said I'd come on your podcast, because I have a message.
And where did that come from? Why do you want people to think a different way?
Yeah, I think, do you know what? And now I won't go back quite as far as the 70s, but being in, having kind of grown up and educated very much in a scientific field, working in the field of medicine and dentistry, you're always taught to analyze, you're taught to question, you're also taught to be very suspicious in many ways. And whenever you set an experiment, you also set up a hypothesis, and you either set out to prove that hypothesis or disprove it, as the case may be. I think I've seen too many people blindfolded. They walk through life blindfolded. That again is a choice. And you can see the way that they're headed. And I suppose some of it is about giving meaning to your own circumstances, isn't it? You're familiar with that phrase, everything that happens to you actually happens for you. And I'm very much a believer in that. And I'm able nowadays to switch so automatically to the slightest little bit of adversity. I'm already looking and seeking out the opportunity rather than sitting in victim mode or feeling sorry for myself or fighting or battling or getting angry. So whatever we go through, if we think of kind of the leadership ladder, there's us. And then we have all these outer circles. We might have us, then we have our immediate circle, which might be our family and our friends. Then we might have that wider circle, which might be our peers or our colleagues. And then we have that wider circle beyond that, which might involve social media, podcasts, TV, articles that you write, to be able to reach more and more people. And as you go through that ascension of leadership, it does become about transcendence. It becomes about, this isn't just about me. This is about the effect and impact that I can have on the world. And for me, that's the pinnacle of leadership. So being on your podcast, writing an article, being interviewed on radio, TV, whatever, all of that is transcendence. It's that pinnacle of my leadership ability to get my message out there, which is a message which I know we're going to get onto about this phrase that we call optimal performance.
I love that. The putting yourself out there. And one thing that I felt when I first put myself out there was always the fear of judgment, or the fear of what will other people think. And when I first started out, that was one of the biggest fear factors of starting the podcast, of documenting my experience and putting it out there. And the fear was getting negative comments. And when I did publish, 80% of the feedback I got was incredibly negative. People saying, you shouldn't talk about your mental health. No one does that. And this is taboo. This is career suicide. And everyone's going to think that you're like a mental nut job, that no one is going to want to hire you. And I was like, okay. And I was just taking it all at face value. And then I said, if I hadn't done the work over the last 3 years on myself, I would have taken this down, buried my head in the sand, and waited for this to become all forgotten, become a memory. But because I'd done the work, I was like, these people are deflecting because they're not comfortable with the feelings I'm bringing up. And rather than me saying, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm so embarrassed, I should never have brought this topic up, and taking it all down, I said, these people are not comfortable with me sharing these things. So I need to talk about this more so that it does become normal. And that required me to show up in a different way. So when I was showing myself out in public and showing up for others, I had to change how I showed up for them so that they could see, as Eugene talks about this a lot, which means it must be normal for him to talk about this. So they had to change their identity of how they saw me as being quiet and not very outspoken to, oh, Eugene is very outspoken about this topic, which means it must be important.
Yeah, exactly. That's fascinating. And, good for you. And you're absolutely right. You need to do that work because in actual fact, the way that our brains are wired, our brains are wired for protection. So we will always look for the critique naturally. We look for the negative. We're looking and assessing all the risk. That's just the way the brain is naturally wired, and particularly when you get to a stress situation. So there is that deflection, absolutely, where people will choose to criticize before they praise. And a lot of the time that praise is internal. Oh, good for you, Gene. Oh, that's great. But they don't think to write a comment. It's the same with reviews. People are very quick to moan and not so quick to praise. And when people are reading reviews, they usually skim past the good bits and they're looking for the critical bits. Should I, what is this? 1 out of 350 people? Why is there this 1-star review? And am I going to listen to them, or am I going to listen to everybody else? But your story reminded me of when I published my first book many years ago now. And there were a lot of my own personal stories in that book, which are potentially quite sensitive. But for someone who didn't know me, I've had reviews come back that have been wonderful, saying, this book was so life-changing, and it was like having you there with me, coaching me, and your stories are so empowering to realize if you can go through all that hardship, then so can I. And that was the purpose. That was my messaging or my intention behind it. However, it's about the people that you do know, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter about strangers. And I remember when I published this book, and I had this persona, in the world of medicine and dentistry, and even the mothers at my kids' schools because they were younger. And that They had a particular idea of who I was, and suddenly I was putting my whole story, and I was a very private person, out into this world. And I just literally remember almost wanting to put a paper bag over my head and hide, saying, here's my book, etc. And then I'm just going to like hide through embarrassment. And it's funny, you're never quite sure about who and how it's going to land. And for me, it was actually my family that were the betrayal, not even my friends. It was phone calls from my brother and my sister phoning saying, I hear, your book has some very sensitive information and that's not actually very appropriate, and have you discussed this with our father? And I phoned my dad, and I was sort of very, very blunt, because the story was there was one story in it. I was talking about forgiveness, and how forgiveness is so multi-layered. Forgiveness is not about just saying I'm sorry. And the reason we need to forgive is to release energy from ourselves, but it's so multi-layered. So I gave an example of having been sexually abused when I was a child, but explaining that this wasn't about needing to forgive my grandfather, or needing to forgive my father for his attitude, or my mother for hers, but it was also even having to forgive culture, and having to forgive the other people around me, and obviously having to forgive myself. And I built this whole layer. So obviously, there's a lot of science in there and a lot of theory, but we said earlier, didn't we? People pick out the bits they want to pick out. And so for my brother and my sister, they just saw mortification, not their own responsibility for the role that they'd played, and I clearly needed to forgive them. And I did. I remember leaving them a message very similar to what you said, having realized I'd done the growth. So suddenly I didn't shrink or cower in that kind of paper bag scenario anymore, and pointed out, well, actually, if you're worried about it, it says far more about you than it does about me. So I'm not going to worry about it, because I know that these messages are going to help so many people, even if they don't help you, because they couldn't relate to them.
Yeah, I love that. Kudos to you as well for having that work done as well, so that it didn't give them the power that they were looking for. Because as well, like when I got the first comments on the podcast, it was from a place of, if you know what's good for you, you'll take this down, or we're only doing this for your sake. And that's what their narrative was saying. I'm doing this for his sake because he doesn't know what he's doing. I'm doing it so that I can be there to support him or be good for him. And it was a feel good response for them. But as soon as I said, okay, I take what you're saying, I take your opinion, but this is my choice. This is how I'm going to approach it. And however you feel about that says, as you said, it says more about you than it does about me. However you choose to respond to my actions, or to my views or my choices, says more about the work that you may need to do and reflect on yourself. And a lot of people said, take down the podcast because you might say things that could offend people. And I said, if you come across something on the podcast that you think is offensive, let me know and I can edit it out. And they said, oh, I don't have the time to be listening to your podcast. And I was like, great. If you don't have the time, then it won't affect you. So I don't see what the problem is here. And then they were like, but what if you do? And I was like, if I do, let me know.
Yeah, but I had two things there with what you said. One was very much, it just goes back again to people's judgments, and this technique of it says more about you than about me is a wonderful technique that anybody can use to kind of just reset their energy. Because what's happening there is, if you think the other way, oh my goodness, oh, did I offend somebody, and or maybe I am saying the wrong thing, and you start to doubt yourself with that heaviness. That's what we call that gremlin energy, isn't it? It's that most powerful limiting belief that starts with I am, takes us back to the beginning of your podcast. And it's typically, I'm not good enough, I'm not clever enough, I'm not intelligent enough, I'm not popular enough, my message isn't strong enough. And you start to doubt yourself, and you can end up living in fear, or you have choice, which is what you did is, and what I've done is turn it into, give it meaning. What you went through wasn't just for you. You can use it to empower others, and the people who need to hear it will hear it. It became bigger than you. So it wasn't just about Eugene. It wasn't just about, the leeway. It was about a message of realign yourself so that you have a life full of purpose, joy, and flow, with no need to have a little break, an interval, which might be a month, a year, 2 years, or permanently through burnout or chronic illness.
Yeah, I think that's what it all came, and I love how you summarized it there as well. We were touching on, I'm just trying to make sure that we get through everything, because we could go on rabbit holes all day. I'm a sucker for going down rabbit holes. But we were talking about optimal performance. So
Yeah.
what is optimal performance?
So we've already been hinting at it, really, haven't we? And this is the understanding that really high performance is something that leads to burnout. People have all heard of it, high performance, peak performance, and it is something that ultimately leads to burnout. You end up down a rabbit hole, you're often tunnel visioned, you become overly ambitious. Your drive is just to achieve that goal, to achieve that peak. And the reality is then what happens when you do that? It's not sustainable. Relationships will often break down. And then you start doubting or wondering when you reach that peak, because it's a little bit like, when you climb a mountain, there's no, it's always a false peak, and then there's disappointment, and then you have to go back up again. So optimal performance is really what I call the secret sauce, really, for sustainable success in all areas of your life. So this isn't just about being successful professionally or personally. It's every single part of your life. So that might be your personal relationships, your intimate relationships, your social life, your work, your finances, your health, your aging, your growth, your personal development, to really be balanced and be sustainably successful in all of those areas of your life. Because when we ask you what you want, most of the time they might say, I want to be successful. But the commonest one is, I want to feel free, or I want to be happy. I just want to be happy. But then they put markers on what that happiness is, right? It's, I need to earn this much money, or I need to have this job. So we're back to the labels again. And as you peel off a layer and it's like, no, actually, I really want to to be happy. What does it involve to be happy? So optimal performance, I really create a triad of really high levels of productivity, living in true joy, and really living your life in balance. And that doesn't mean work-life balance. There's more to work, is just part of it.
Yes, I love. I was going to say I love when people use the word work-life balance, but I don't love it. I find it fascinating that when people say work-life balance, they think it means 50% work and 50% life. And for me, it's like, because work is part of our life also. So for me, I prefer to say it's a harmonization. You shouldn't work as if it's a grind and then look at the other 50% as the life you want to live. The work you do should also be part of the life you want to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some people, it's actually a lot more than 50-50. You get to the high performance, it's probably more like the 80-20. So you've got to be happy doing it. But at that point, it might not actually feel like work, which is fair enough. But it's about the fine tuning. You have an athlete, they want to win a race. They don't just want to win one race. They want to get to the world championships. They want to get to the Olympics. They want medals. They have to sustain their performance for that whole season, right? And seasons beyond, so they can keep on winning those medals. How do you do that? It's constant fine tuning, not just, okay, let me just put a load of fuel and away you go, be a one-hit wonder.
Yes, and I cover this as well when I speak about high performance and peak performance as well. People think that peak performance means you're operating at 100%, 100% of the time. And I'm like, if you look at peak performers or top performers like in Formula One or in the Olympics, the race time is not 24 hours. The Olympics, any swimming or sprinting or anything, it's a matter of minutes or seconds. And that's the peak performance or that they're striving for. But it's the recovery and the mindset and everything that happens in the background, all the boring stuff that happens in the dark that people don't see. That's not them operating at 100% all the time. There's days that they're operating at 40 or 80 or 20 or less, because that's what's needed in order to attain peak performance when it's needed most. So when we see it in the workplace as well, if someone is having an off day, they might not have the capacity to reach 100% today, but they don't need to have 100% at all their tasks. If you can address catching up on emails and doing the administrative work, that does not require the same capacity as when you have 100%. So you can still get by, but you shouldn't be shaming yourself or guilting yourself for not operating at 100%, or guilting your team for not operating at 100%. 100% of the time.
But I suppose I'd challenge you to say, well, what is 100%? It's the same way as I talk about redefining your definition of success. What is success to you? So that success may actually be that, you're not operating at 100% all the time. It's that you are managing to sustain high levels of energy, high levels of engagement, high levels of achievement, high levels of connection.
Yes. So like for me, given certain strengths, things that require 100% output, it could be doing a presentation. things that require a lot of energy, both capacity and being able to present or provide a training, or if you're working face to face with a customer doing, especially I find doing pitches or presentations probably the most exhausting, or doing a full day training session are the most exhausting work, or things that require a lot of focus. You might, in healthcare, if you're performing a procedure, an operation, they require a lot of intense focus. So that is physically, mentally, emotionally draining. So there are things that require 100% focus all the time. But then other things where you can take a step back, if you're doing maybe the documentation, you're doing your taxes, you're doing the administrative work, it might not require the same intensity, and it can be done at maybe a slower pace, but you're still operating. For me, it's like between the 40 to 60 range. It does not require my absolute focus. I can take breaks. I can take more breaks for getting a walk in, or getting a coffee or a glass of water, or consulting with other people where I don't have to operate at the highest capacity. But that is enough to get through the work. But there are some activities that will require your peak focus or your peak attention. And there are things that you can sustain for a certain period of time, but not all day. And for me, that's, people kind of have to figure out when in their day it works for them, because there's the period that leads up to the peak activation and the period afterwards where you need to recover. So people kind of have to figure out, for me, we have to figure out when it works best for us in our day, and how can we work around that, or how can we optimize for that.
Yeah, and it is about optimization, really, isn't it? So I mean, that kind of brings us on to one of the components in the NAILET system, which is what I call the IMERS. So it's about your energetic influences. So it's almost really what you've been talking about. So the I is understanding that your energy, the energy you have all day, or to perform a task, or to communicate, or whatever it happens to be, it's all influenced by different things. So the I is about your identity. You know, if you have this limiting belief, that you can't do it, or you're not good enough, or you're fearful, or you have belief systems that this will never happen. So things like that, that's always going to get in your way and stop you doing that, right? And again, if we're fearful, if we're worried, it's going to drain our energy. The A is for mental. So this is about your mental clutter. So how do you influence your energy based on mental? Like how much stuff is going around in your head? How much do you need to actually do a brain dump to clear the mental clutter? How much else might be going on in other parts of your life when you're trying to focus on work? So of course there are ways to optimize that, do a brain dump versus understanding and recognize that sometimes there is so much going on, you have decision fatigue and you just can't think anymore. The E then is about your emotional influences. So again, the emotional is thinking about the need for emotional regulation. How do you optimize using emotional intelligence training skills to do a task as well as possible? So it might be you're doing some brainstorming. So actually, emotionally, you need to get your energy up. You need to fly high, as you said, or to perform a speech. Versus doing deep work, you may actually need to get yourself more into what we call the unpleasant zone and lower your energy so that you can do that deep focus work. So it's about how you can manipulate or adjust your emotions and having those strategies to optimize your performance. Then we have S, which is the social. So that might be, we talked about it, right? What people think of you. So the society around you, your social peers, the people you hang around with, your friends, do they drain you or do they lift you up? If you want to perform better and you need to elevate your energy, then you want to make sure you don't answer that phone when you have that one person who really annoys you all of the time, calling you just before you're about to go and do a presentation, because it's going to drain your energy. And then the last bit, of course, is about your environment. You know, how cluttered is your desk? How cold is it? How hot is it? What's the lighting like? All of those things affect your energy. And actually, I forgot the R in IMERS, which is what I call real. So you talked about getting water. How hydrated are you? How well fed are you? How much sleep have you had? Do you have a headache? Are you in some kind of physical pain? Because that's all going to influence how you show up. In other words, your energy. So these IMERS, IMERSE, they're all what we call the energetic influences, and how you can increase them or reduce them to perform at your best, depending what task you have.
From your experience, which of the IMERS do you feel that people neglect the most?
Oh, that's a good question. To be honest, I think probably the I, because they're unaware of it. So often when you're not as conscious, you're not as self-aware, you haven't started to go along that journey, all the belief systems, all the thoughts, all the feelings, they are at a subconscious level because you just assume that's just the way you are. We're right back to the beginning about how everything is choice, but at that point you don't realize it's choice. So you don't realize there's gremlin energy. You don't realize your fears are being triggered. So until you've done the work on yourself to sort out that identity aspect, I think that's probably the toughest one. It requires the deepest work as opposed to writing everything down that's in your head on paper, or changing rooms, or removing people from your life, which is obviously more challenging, but you're aware of it. It's more obvious.
Yes, identity has been one of the biggest things. If I have to go back, hindsight of everything, what needs to change is my identity and the self-awareness and reflection and the pain and discomfort it took to acknowledge that's what had to change in order for everything to improve. It's hard to break an identity, especially once you've built up that facade for a long time, seeking the status, the success, the metrics that other people set for you for years. And then you're like, there's no fulfillment in this. And I realized that I've been just chasing external validation. None of this is what I wanted. It was just what people expected of me. And acknowledging that was one of the most freeing things I did. I was like, if all of this went away, who would I be? And how would I feel? And I was like, I feel free because I wouldn't be living up to anyone else's expectations. And that was probably the scariest thing at the time, but also the most relieving thing I could tell myself in that moment.
Yeah. And I think that we find that a commonality with people who have struggled and then gone down that personal growth, personal development route, because they have to ask themselves those questions. Because up until then, you don't know, do you? So for me, similarly to you, was always achieving, my goodness, right from my younger years, never a grade B, and then working so hard and always aiming to be the top, and then always aiming to be the best, and then taking on multiple tasks and taking on huge responsibility and traveling the world, lecturing and speaking, and where's the next speaking opportunity, and yeah, I can handle it, pass it over, and being the friend to everybody but that was just me because I hadn't done the self-reflection until everything came crashing down, or then you start to think, okay, something, trying to understand why there's a repetition in what keeps happening. We talk about wake-up calls, and sometimes it's not that your body gives up or that you become chronically ill. It might be little niggles, like your finances, repeated patterns there. It might be repeated patterns in little niggles of your health, or in repeated patterns of your relationships. You start to notice commonalities, and that's your opportunity, isn't it? It's your opportunity to wake up and actually ask yourself, what is it about me that is actually creating these situations? So you start to get that responsibility. And like with you, I realized actually for me, God, I had all these accolades, but they were feeding my ego, and not even in a nasty way, because I didn't even realize, but it was something that was making me feel better about myself. So the deep work was realizing maybe deep down, Rana, you don't really love yourself, which again is another phrase we just take for granted, don't we? Love, especially in the business world, how can you talk about self-love? But it's so important. Like, if you're not going to love yourself and value yourself, who's going to value you? And until you realize that, and you're grounded in that, and you start building these roots that are so solid in the ground that no one can sway your identity at all after that, because you love yourself, you know who you are, and you know exactly what your truth is. And then it doesn't matter what people say, because you know what you stand for. But you have to love yourself to do that.
One of the most empowering phrases that I came across on my journey was, no one is coming to save you. And for me, that was, when I heard it, I was like, well, that's empowering. And I was like, that means that all the power is within me. I have full control of the situation. No one is coming to save me. So I'm not waiting around for anyone. If I want change to happen, I need to make that change. I'm fully responsible. And that was extremely empowering for me. And I did an episode where we talked about that. I was like, no one's coming to help you. It's fully your responsibility. There was backlash, being like, how dare you say that? It's like, it's so discouraging and all this. And straight up, I was like, but that's your narrative. I was like, and that's a great thing, because it's ruffling your feathers. This phrase, no one is coming to save you, is ruffling your feathers as a mismatch to say, hey, this doesn't reaffirm the beliefs I have of it's someone else's problem and I'll wait for them to fix it, or I'll wait for things to get worse and then someone will have to step in and help me. I was like, but if you believe that no one is coming to save you and you're not happy with the situation you're in now, you have the full power to choose how you get out of this or how you change this. And So for some people who reached out, they were like, we don't believe or we don't agree with you on this. And I was like, that's great. That's great. This is a discussion. You get to choose how you respond to that narrative. You get to choose that. I'm not here to change that for you. You get to choose how you respond. And that was the whole thing about the podcast. It was like, look, I'm not here to save anyone. And for me, that was killing also the hero complex, where a lot of people feel that they need to go out and save everyone else around them. And for me, it was we can share our stories, we can share our beliefs, but I'm not forcing them on anyone else.
Yeah.
This is what I find empowering. And it might not be the same for you. You might find something else equally or more empowering, but it doesn't have to be the same thing that I believe. It's whatever works for you. And once you do the reflection and see that it is serving you versus it's not serving you, it might be what's comfortable, it might be what's extremely uncomfortable, but it's whatever helps serve you in what you want to pursue in life.
Yeah. It's what filter you're putting on, aren't you? So you saw it from a positive and someone else saw it from a negative. So another way to phrase it is, I've got good news and bad news. Which bit do you want? Good, I want the bad news first. Okay, the bad news, which is obviously their filter. No one's coming to save you. You're like, okay, I'm going to have to do it myself. Do you want the good news? Yes. The good news is no one's coming to save you. And then it shifts your thinking from, no, poor me, to, actually, that maybe it's not just bad news, maybe it is good news, maybe that could empower me as well. So it's a slightly different take and development on that phrase that you talked about. And the other thing I heard you say was, this idea of trying to save people. And this is, again, it comes down to identity and self-love a lot of the time. And people resonate as, I'm the giver, I have to do everything for everyone else. And you may genuinely be that, but I'd always ask you to think why, because most people like that really tend to lack boundaries. They tend not to be able to say no, in which case we're totally headed down the burnout path. But also, so the one that ruffles feathers is when I propose in that circumstance that maybe it's because you need the validation. You need to feel like you're a good person by the fact you are doing all of this stuff. And it does ruffle feathers, because usually it's, no, I'm a genuinely good person. I really want to do everything. It's like, that's fine. No one's telling you not to do it. It's about how could you lift your leadership ability from just doing everything for everyone else to factoring yourself in the equation as well. It's like, I will do stuff for you, but only if I win as well. There's nothing selfish in that. And if you can lift to that leadership level from I win and that you win and that's okay because I want to do everything for you, to I win only if you win as well, or you win only if I win, and then up even more to everybody wins, then you really are leading to the getting to the pinnacle of ultimate real leadership capability.
I love that because it's coming from a place of I need to fill my capacity to show up at my best. If I want to show up at my best for you, my capacity needs to allow for that. And it's not a matter of I need to take 5 weeks of vacation so that I can come back and help you then. It's like, no, what can I do to help you within my capacity? But you're going to meet me and help in some way. And in order to do that, you're going to grow. I'm going to grow and you're going to grow alongside me. I'm going to show up at this capacity, which gives you the space that you need in order to come meet me and grow along the way. And that's something that I love, that people don't need to come in and do everything for you, or you don't need to come in and do everything for someone else, which is kind of enabling them to stay in the comfort. And also, if you enable people too much, in turn, they will resent you for not giving them the space to grow or to become the person they want to become. So it's like a double-edged sword where people are trying to get the validation of saving people, but at the same time ruining relationships because they're being like helicopter parenting is one of my favorite examples. I see it the whole time. And it's just like that the helicopter parenting is like, no, you have to stop being a helicopter parent and give them the room to grow, because that in turn is a big leadership role as a parent. And it is like, no, you actually have to give them the space, give them the room that they need to fall and pick themselves back up again, because that's part of the growth curve.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's a different, have you heard of cliff top parenting?
Cliff top parent? No.
So that's the overprotective one as well, where you're just so overprotective, like you don't let them do anything. You might not let them ever have a social media account or anything like that. And then suddenly when they're allowed to, yeah, it's to 16, 18 or whatever, they can drink, you don't let them have any alcohol, whatever. And then when they're allowed to, it's like falling off a cliff because they go into complete overdrive because you've never given them a little bit of a taster and a little bit of an example and a way to find their own feet.
Yeah, and never came cliff top parenting. Yes, I know a few examples of kids in university who were like that.
Yeah.
As soon as they were able to let loose, as soon as they were given an ounce of freedom,
Mhm.
they went all out and completely binged, and everyone was like, "Whoa, whoa!" It's like this is not how we do it.
Yeah.
It's like, but any taste of freedom, they would go overboard, and yeah, that was the extreme of overprotecting was actually more harmful than just, as you said, give people a taste of freedom. I love the example of the alcohol where some of my friends were just given like beer at 16 and they would go hell for leather and then they get horrifically sick and then as soon as they hit 20 they're like no I'm done this they're like my college years have been so clean because I overdid it when I was 16 to 18.
Yeah, exactly. And you can take that into everyday life as well, can't you? Not just thinking about parenting. It's about what you might be doing it with a friend. Have a friend in need. And our natural instincts as human beings, when we care for people and we love for people, is to look after them and to take care of them. And actually, it can seem counterintuitive to actually leave that person alone. But we're right back again to what we were saying earlier. They need to go through the experience themselves. It's like when we're coaching people. When I coach people, and when I also train people to become coaches. I run a diploma, a postgraduate diploma. And one of the things I always say is the one phrase you must never say is, I know how you feel. Because you really don't. You might have an idea. We want you to be empathetic, but every single person is completely different with completely different life experiences, wearing different filters. Even if it's a slight tweak, it's still a version 2.0 or 3.0. Never exactly the same, but you never know how anybody feels. And when you're communicating with people, to be mindful of never using that or making the story about you when someone is trying to share their problems.
That's a big thing, especially I see in leadership. And as soon as they use the phrase, I know how you feel, I'm like, do you? Do you really? What phrase would you get them to say instead? If they want to be compassionate and more show more empathy to their team, what phrase should they use instead of saying, I see how you feel?
If they've been talking about it, it may be, I hear you and reflect it back. What I'm hearing you say is that you're feeling overwhelmed, overworked, like you're not being listened to. What would you need to feel more listened to? To then follow up with a question. Then they feel heard because you've just reflected their words back to them. Or you want to show a bit of empathy. I can only begin to imagine how hard and challenging this must be for you. What I heard you say was that you don't feel heard, that you're feeling overwhelmed, that you're feeling overburdened, that team members are not collaborating, and then open it up to solution. What do you think the solution might be? What could I do to assist you? What could you do differently to assist yourself so that you don't keep feeling this way? What support do you need? We just open it up with open-ended questions afterwards. But yeah, never, oh yeah, I know how you feel.
Yeah, that was one thing that used to always irritate me. It was like, but how could you know what I feel? It's like even in the words that I'm using to describe it right now, it's like I'm putting on a filter so that it's I'm not, let's say, oversharing. And I'm trying to be very politically correct how I'm sharing this feeling. And then say, oh, I know exactly how you feel. And they're like, if you knew exactly how I felt, we wouldn't be in this scenario where I'm sharing this with you. And so that's where there's like a disconnect where they're trying to, let's say, calm a situation or dissolve a situation. But as a result, their intention is to dissolve it, but it ends up making it worse because they're trying to show empathy, but they're showing it in the wrong way. And it's actually causing more issues. So that was a big thing that I see a lot in poor leadership, where they're trying to show up, their intention is to show up more human, but they're coming across the wrong way. And I love your approach, and it's the approach I use as well. It's like let them feel like they're being heard, and then offer them, instead of coming up with a solution for them or problem solving for them, let them be a part of the solution. Because, and we see this in coaching as well, it's you don't give them the solutions, you just ask them the questions because they already have the answers themselves. It's not about giving them the answer they're looking for, it's about providing them with the asking the right questions to themselves. Because the answers that we have for anything in life are in the truth that we tell ourselves.
Always within us. Always within us. We do have the answers, and coaching allows you the ability to facilitate that space and remove the fears and really resonate in what do you truly want and what needs to happen. I just want to pick up, I know we're running out of time, but I want to pick up on your empathy point. And again, it's a common myth that people think, obviously they tend to confuse empathy and sympathy, which are not the same thing. But I often see people, particularly professionals, think that empathy is about kind of bringing your energy down to meet somebody. Empathy can also be a very high energy feeling. So I may want to celebrate with you. And so you matching my energy of like, hey, Eugene, I mean, we're going to get onto my book. I know. So it's like, hey, Eugene, my book's just been published and the book launch was amazing. And you're just going to be like, that's good. I'm really happy for you, versus matching my energy. Oh my goodness, Rana, I'm so happy for you. That's amazing. You must be so proud. I know how hard you worked. Then I feel heard and understood because you've matched my energy. So empathy is just about matching someone's energy where they're at, not just the being compassionate, which is one of the common myths that I hear people saying.
Yes, it comes back to resonance. I feel it's just like you want to meet them at where they are at, and depending on whether you're trying to diffuse a situation or whether you're trying to celebrate, as you say, you want to meet them at where they're at, and then either guide them to where you want to go,
Mm-hmm.
rather than coming at, let's say, if you're up on high side in the book, and I just go, well, that's nice.
Little child saying, you didn't hear me.
That would not go down well. That really would not go down well.
No, it wouldn't at all. Exactly. So it comes back to identity. I mean, on all these things we're talking about, obviously, like your overarching theme for your podcast is about burnout, right? So all of the relevance of bringing it back is all of these little things. We talked about energetic influences, we touched on truth, we're talking about identity, we're talking about choice, we're talking about boundaries. All of that stuff, when you align it and you fine tune it, is what helps you show up as you and prevent burnout.
Yes, exactly. It all comes back to identity. And once there's a mismatch between the values you have of yourself, the identity, who you see yourself as, and how you show up in the world. Are you showing up true to yourself? And a lot of people don't know who they are. They're just living the life that they've always lived. And that was me for a very long time. And it was only once you started asking the deep questions to be like, is this life I want to live? Are they the standards that I set for myself, or did someone else put them in place for me? Am I living life by someone else's rule book? And is that the rule book I want to follow? And they're difficult, they're raw, uncomfortable questions. And if you're on the wrong path, it's never too late to switch paths. It's uncomfortable. Of course, it's going to be uncomfortable. And how far along a path you are doesn't mean you have to spend, like, if I chose to be a doctor and spent 10 years, 10, 15 years studying to be a doctor, and then decided, actually, no, I want to become a yoga teacher in Southeast Asia. I was like, oh, but you wasted half of your life. And I'm like, no, I got a lot of experience in that time. And now, from that experience, I decided that's not for me. And I want to explore something else. I don't need to spend the next 50 years of my life doing something that I know I would not like doing. Now, if I go and become a yoga teacher in Southeast Asia and realize, okay, actually, that's not for me, I've got something to go back to. If I want to go back to become a doctor.
But you've also got lessons, right?
So many lessons in life.
Everything is lessons. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's an analogy to me, right? To become a specialist periodontist, it's like 11 years of study to be a hospital consultant. And yet now I coach. I do very little clinical work, and mainly I coach and I train leadership teams, and I work with businesses to transform them using sort of well-being and performance tools. People are like, well, why? Hello, why? Because actually, I haven't just trained to become a coach. That's just given me a few of the skills, but it's all of this life experience, this 30 years of being top of a field that I then bring into something else. And if I decided I don't want to do this anymore, and actually I just give it all up and just go back to clinical work, well, I would have still gained so much insight from that choice to then bring into my clinical field. And actually it does. I coach. When I do clinical work, I coach my patients. I'm using the coaching skills, empathy, to get buy-in, to care for my patients, to get them to open up to me, to really make shifts and change for them. Every single thing you go, nothing is a waste of time. And you said if you're on the wrong path, and I wanted to just challenge you there and then say there is no right or wrong. It's just a path. But it's if you want to change paths, if you decide you're on a path that doesn't serve you anymore, and not to be so limited by the idea of, oh my God, I've spent this long, so I must just carry on down that way. And you gave a beautiful example of, well, You've got a platform you can always go back to, but if you really want to grow, then just try it and see where it takes you. What's the worst that could happen? You'll gain experiences, you'll learn lessons that you can use moving forward in whichever path you then choose to go down.
I love that, especially because your path led you down to writing another book. Someone has been up my literally like tapping me on the shoulder for ages about writing a book, and I'm like, I have had so many authors on the podcast. I know what writing a book entails, and it's not just about putting the front cover to back cover; it's everything that comes after also. And I'm like, and I know how much capacity I have right now. So a lot of respect to anyone who goes into book writing and especially publishing and the marketing that comes afterwards. So your book, Nail It?
Nail It Leadership.
Yes.
Nail It Leadership, your blueprint to optimal performance.
Who is that book for? If someone is to pick up your book and you're like, this is not for you, or this is for you.
This is for you. This is for you if you are a professional, if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're somebody who is questioning what success truly means, if you're not quite where you want it to be, and yet you know that there is another way. If you are curious, then absolutely this book is for you. It's about, exactly as we talked about, a system and a blueprint, very practical for how to achieve sustainable success.
And Rana, is there anything that we haven't covered yet? That you're like, he's like, Eugene, you've been off on a rant for the past hour, and they're like, what's the one thing that you want people to know that we haven't talked about just yet?
There was one more little thing on our list, and it's about limelight. So
The truth that we tell ourselves.
The truth we tell ourselves. So, I mean, the whole Nail It system is built around 6 core pillars, which is going to be very relevant to your high performance aspect as well. So it's an acronym. It stands for your needs, your attitude, your integrity, limitlessness, so all those beliefs, your intuition, and then tangibility, really making things happen. And then each of those pillars are their own little systems. So there are actually 38 components that you need to master for optimal performance to resonate in who you truly are, right? And therefore create that reality. We were talking about it offline, weren't we? You change your personality, change your personal reality. So limelight is just one of those, which sits in the limitless lesson, all about, which is the boundless beliefs method. And the L, I talk about limelight, of really when you have a belief, to become limitless, you need to get rid of any beliefs that limit you, so you really feel free. And so to shed light on something is, whenever there is a belief, whenever you have a thought, try to literally imagine putting it on the palm of your hand and thinking, how true is that really? Is it my truth, or is it really true? So, the example I classically give is, the Flat Earth Brigade, right? They adamantly believe the world is flat, but we know what true really is, but that's their truth. So I'd ask your audience to always ask yourself, and this will help to set you free, is, what are you telling yourself? How much can you really stand in your truth to make you feel better and value yourself? And what is really true? So be your own critic, because that will set you free as well. Exactly like you said, shed the light on the beliefs that you have. How true are they? And what is your truth?
I love that. I almost went off on a tangent about the flat earthers because you brought it up. There was a tweet before about the flat earthers convention, and it started off with flat earthers around the globe.
That's a brilliant way of doing it. So, but again, it's just one of those little tactics that will ultimately set you free as you wake up, as you become more conscious, as you realize. So if ever you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling doubtful, if you're wondering about something, just pause for a second. You talked about taking a breath, but just pause for a second and think, okay, this is how I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling this way, what am I believing? In other words, what am I thinking? Work backwards. Once you've worked out what you're thinking, then ask yourself, if I shed light on that, how true is it really? In other words, am I really not clever enough? Actually, look at all the letters after my name. So of course, I'm not really telling myself what's true. I'm just using a truth, which is adding to my anxiety or my stress. That's just another practical example.
I love that. It always comes back to, as you said, the truth that we tell ourselves. It's like computer coding. It's like whatever language that we use is going to have a different result, or the inputs that we have is going to shape how we see our reality. So simply by changing the words that we use to describe ourselves, the narrative that we have, the story that we share about ourselves. That's going to reshape how we see life and the actions that we take as a result.
Yeah, brilliant. And now I'm going to zip my lips because I think we definitely covered everything, Eugene.
Rana, thank you so much. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you so much.